All right, guys, so this one is for the facial bones. So the facial bones right in the front of your on your face. So the first one you have is your cheekbone right here. This is the zygomatic bone. You can see that the zygomatic bone does make part of the orbit there, of the orbit. This one right here is your maxilla. So your maxilla, it attaches all the way to your frontal bone. So it goes all the way up the sides of the nose to the frontal bone. It makes part of the orbit as well. So this orange part right there is the orbit of the maxilla, making the orbit. It makes the front of the hard palate, and it has the processes for the teeth called the alveolar processes. Underneath the eye, you'll see that the maxilla has a little foramen right here. That's the infraorbital foramen. So the main parts of the maxilla, or the main important things, is that remember that it touches the frontal bone. It makes it has the infraorbital foramen, it has the alveolar processes, and it makes the front part of the hard palate. Behind the hard palate right here, you have something in pink. That is the palatine bone. So the palatine bone makes the back of the hard palate. If you look through the nose, we talked about this being the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. Then below that, you have the vomer. So this bone right here in blue is the vomer that makes the inferior part of the nasal septum. If you look inside the nose, you'll see this bone in green right here. That's the inferior nasal concha or concha. So the inferior nasal concha is right here at the bottom. And that's what's usually called the turbinate. So you have the middle nasal concha and the inferior nasal concha, and they their job is to warm up the air and humidify it. On top of the nose right here, you have the nasal bones. You have two. They're two little plates. They form the bridge of the nose. And then if you turn it sideways, you have a pink bone right here. That's the lacrimal bone. So you have a nasal bone, maxilla, and lacrimal bone. Then behind that, you see that yellow. That's the ethmoid. So this would be the ethmoid bone in yellow. So that is the order: nasal, maxilla, lacrimal, and ethmoid. The back of the eye is green. That's the sphenoid. You can see that the eye orbit is made up by the frontal bone. You have lacrimal, ethmoid, you have maxilla, and you have zygomatic bone. So there's a lot of bones that make that orbit. If we look at the bottom, I don't have a colorful mandible. This is the mandible or the jawbone. In the back, you have the condylar process of the mandible that attaches to that articular cartilage of the TMJ. Then you have this notch, and in the front right here, you have the coronoid process of the mandible. This part of the mandible right here is called the ramus. This is the inguinal, and this is the body of the mandible. You have two little foramina right here and right here. That's the mental foramen, and then the chin part is the mental protuberance. There are other landmarks in the mandible that I'm not going to go over, but there are other landmarks for muscle attachments and things like that. So we'll go into those later on.